Okay, so this is how I've been cutting my deep frames down to medium frames for the past couple years because I'm switching to all medium beekeeping. Basically, this is what I want. I want that frame. I want this portion of the deep frame cut off, minus the length of or the width of the bottom bar, because I'm going to reuse the bottom bar, the original bottom bar on this frame. So what I do, I don't measure it. You can measure it, I guess, but if you're like me and you don't really measure things, you do this. Take your thing. Oh, by the way, this isn't even plugged in, and I've got all the safety gear turned off or removed, but that's just for demonstration purposes. So I take my frame and I go boop. I jam it up against the thing. Now that would be great if I didn't have to account for the bottom bar. So I need to get that blade right here. So basically, I just take it. See that? There's the blade. And there's the bottom bar underneath the frame, and I just slide it over, whoops, until that blade hits the bottom bar. And that's where we want to make the cut. So that's my cut. That's basically how I do it. And I go, jam that baby down, and you got this thing in place. And I'm such a non-woodworker type of guy, I don't even know what that's called. Now, it helps too if the bottom bar on your medium frame is the same width as the bottom bar on your deep, because this is the one we're going to reuse. And this one's a bit thicker, so I'm actually going to just adjust this just a little bit. Okay, so now I've adjusted this thing so that when I cut through my deep, it'll be the width of this medium frame minus the bottom bar. Okay, now for this portion of the demonstration, I still have the safety guard off, and I don't have this plugged in yet, but I will in a second. And I'm going to cut through the deep, and I'm way out of the line of fire. I've got full gear all over me. You can't see me, but I'm fully protected, and I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. Don't do this at home, but you can see the blade will cut right through this deep, and we'll get a nicely cut medium frame out of this, minus the bottom bar. I just noticed just before I was about to cut, there's a bit of burr comb on top of this, so I'm just going to scrape that off. Because this is my, that's my guide. I'm using the top bar as my guide, so I can't have any bumps in the cut. So now we're good to go. And I'm never going to do that again. That was sort of unnerving to do this just for demonstration purposes, but let me just turn off the power. Okay, the power's off, and you can see right here the frame was cut straight through, and ta-da! See? You can see there should be just enough room to add the bottom bar to this cut frame. So let's do that. And this is what gets left over. But we're going to reuse every bit of it except for this tiny section of sidebar. So once I cut through the frame, the deep frame, it looks like this. Sort of a medium frame. It cuts right through the plastic foundation and the comb and the whole thing. It just no problems. I've done this with foundationless frames as well, with wire and fishing wire and all that stuff holding it together, and it zips through it no problem. So I got my frame, and then I got the leftover bit of frame, the bottom of the frame that I cut off, and you can just pull the leftover foundation right off that bottom, and it just sticks together like that. And it's kind of old, and well, I mean, it depends on the age of it, but this one is pretty old. But this can be used for foundationless frames. You can just stick it in where normally you'd have the starter strip, and just jam it in there, and that'll work. And I've used it like that. You can use it for just messy comb in a swarm trap or whatever you want, or you can just throw it in the garbage. I've also used it as smoker fuel. Take old comb, wax, beeswax, really, it's very flammable. So you get left with this at the end of it, which is basically the bottom bar and a little bit of the side bar. And I just twist it off like this. Hold on. Okay, now sometimes it breaks off a little bit like that, but I don't think it's the end of the world. This one is particularly tight. I think this is what this is what happened to someone. I got this frame from somebody else, and I can see right now because this is not. I don't use these things to put my frames together, and they glued it. You can see it's super glued together. So this is why. And then I just take it and I nail it on. And if the frame doesn't break off like this one did, because it was glued together, it's pretty easy to nail it back on. So let's just pretend this one's useless, so I'm just going to use that as a stir stick, and I'll just replace it with a regular bottom bar. And usually I have no problem breaking off the bottom bar, and it comes out looking pretty much like this. So I just put the bottom bar right on top of the frame, and I nail it in. And now we've got a medium frame that used to be a deep frame. Now this bottom bar isn't, nailed on the way you normally would, and normally it would be secured into the bottom of the groove in the bottom bar. Like it's not actually attached to the bottom, but it is definitely attached on the sides and on the top. And once I put it inside the hide, the bees quickly seal that in, and it becomes a solid frame, just as good as any other frame. And look at that, nice drawn comb. Pretty nice. And the final test is to put it inside a super, a medium super, and see if it fits. And you can see it does. See that? It's swinging. So this one might have been cut just a little bit too short because there's a little bit of extra space under here. This should be about the width of a honeybee, or the height of a honeybee, which is we call bee space. So there might be a little bit of a gunked up comb in there, but not a lot. And so it's, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And so all I need to do is for the next one, I'll just cut this a little bit longer for the next frame that I cut. And when I peel the bottom bar off what's left of the frame that I just cut, it's got all this gunk on the bottom. So that's when the old hive tool comes in handy. Smooth as a baby's bottom. Not exactly, but close enough. And then I go nail in my bottom bar. And see, the nail goes all the way down there. This is going to go right here. And sometimes if the wood gets cracked here and there and other places, you might need to, find another place for the nail or just use a different bottom bar. Not all the bottom bars are recyclable. Like this here piece is a bit busted up, but I can still put a nail in right here. I can use thick ones in the middle, but I got to use the thin ones on the side. It can be a little bit tricky. Yeah, I think that's just as secure. It looks like garbage, but I think that's just as secure as any normal. Definitely just as secure as any of those compressor nails. So here's one of the frames. If you look closely, you can see there's a little bit too much space there. Not too bad. And then I changed the setting on the cut, and now it's pretty good. In fact, it's almost a little bit too long, but in the ballpark. Hey, this is kind of interesting. This is one of the pieces that I cut off one of the frames, and you can see here the cells are bigger over this on that end and not as big on this end. And this is worker comb, and this is drone comb, or drone brood comb. And you can see if you look right down the edge of it, see that? Right? Going in, normal looking, and then it starts getting bumpy and big, right? And there's a cross section of some drone comb. See how big it is? See that? There's the workers, and they're smaller. Do it again. Drones, big holes, big cavity, Workers, small hole, small cavity. There you go.